My birth was a miracle. My mother was the survivor of the Nazi extermination camps in Germany. She lived in those camps as a slave throughout her entire teenage experience. She was liberated finally at the young age of 18 after losing all of her family, except for the family that she had in the United States of America. From the stench of slavery and death, my mom was granted liberation and freedom in the land of the free and the home of the brave, the United States of America. And she came there on Ellis Island. Ellis Island was the place in the United States where people from other countries first had to come in and be processed. When she arrived, they found out that my mom had tuberculosis. So instead of being free, she was then sent to a hospital for the next almost 2 years of her life. But against all odds, my mom survived. She was cured. And she decided that she was going to go to paradise, Miami, Florida. She had a great aunt who lived there, who was this miracle maker with Hungarian strudel. And she had a brother who lived there. And my mom was a looker. And she was also a person whose belief about positive futures was something that imbued her. And so she went there all by herself at then the age of 19 and a half and met my father, an American young hottie who had just graduated from college as a civil engineer. And everything was falling into place. I was conceived out of love. And when I was conceived, my mother went, of course, to the doctor, and they found that the tuberculosis had resurfaced. There had never been a live birth of a healthy child from an active woman who had tuberculosis. They told my mother that she needed to abort the fetus, me. My mother said no. And so she was under the care of a wonderful, compassionate doctor who helped her to balance the medications that she needed to take for her own survival and health with the health of an emerging fetus. And lo and behold, 9 months later, I was born. I was the first healthy live birth of an active tuberculosis woman ever to be born in the United States. Wow. Wow, ever to be born in the United States of America. What a miracle. One of the things that I learned from this beautiful woman, my mom, because I used to ponder, as you could well imagine, how, when you're a child, how do you not only survive, but how do you live with the optimism and with the hope and with the belief in a humanity that is good, that my mother instilled into my DNA. It was because my mother never believed that the actions of a few, no matter how many those few are necessarily what define us as human beings. She learned early on, amongst that stench, amongst that death and deprivation, that if she stayed in that she would not survive. So what she did, she tethered to a future. She tethered to a future where she imagined herself free, where she imagined herself healthy, and she imagined herself living in a world that said, yes, there will be no more disenfranchised people for any reason, unless they choose to be. There will be no one who is marginalized because of their religion, their gender, their sex, or their socioeconomics. And so my mother taught me this just as she taught me, very painfully, I might say, how to knit. I hated knitting, but my mom is Romanian, and in that tradition, sewing and embroidering and knitting were a way of giving love. And so I grew up and I said, what can I do? What can I do? I'm just one little girl living in Miami, Florida. Well, I became a therapist. And I worked for many years with the marginalized and the disenfranchised, helping hundreds of thousands of babies, children, adults, and the elderly to realize that yes, they were special. Not disabled, but special, as each of us sitting here in this room are. Each of us within us have the DNA of heroes and of giants. And so, against all odds, I fought a system that said, put them in a closet, lock them in a corner, do your work, but don't let us see it. And I created beautiful places with outstanding therapy teams. When I worked with children, my offices looked like playgrounds. They had rock climbing walls and swing sets and every kind of thing that you could imagine. I created ranches where the children and their families could ride horses, could swim, and could learn to play, because the language of children and the way they learn is through play. And I was very, very successful. This lasted me for most of my adult life until my brilliant husband, who was a neurologist, became sick with a brain tumor. And I went through a period of time with my husband of psychosis and of terror because his brilliance was clouded by insanity. But our love was durable. Our love was delicious and juicy. And against all odds, he survived. Ultimately, he lived not very long, but he lived long enough to know that he was able to come back to being a doctor. We were going to be able to live our life in love. And against all odds, we began to vision a future. That DNA, that triumph in the face of tragedy and in the face of success, that is what helps me to vision to a future of more. It is not the tragedy and it is not the success that defines us unless we allow it to. It's our response to that. And I want you to hear me now. I am an awakening giant. Woo!